Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football Dill. Late Tuesday night, some massive news for the Missouri Tiger fans coming out of the transfer portal as former Georgia edge rusher Damon Wilson commits to the Missouri Tigers. This has been a Rock Boy favorite for the last 2 years, right? Watching Damon Wilson as a freshman, you always looked at him and said, that kid looks special, but there was kind of a little bit more player development that needed to take place going into 2024. He certainly took a step in the right direction. And this is what fires me up the most about Damon Wilson Dill. He's not that fourth-year guy going into his fifth year that's probably not going to get better as a football player. The arrow is going so far right in the right direction. That's what excites me the most. This kid was really good for Georgia in 2024, had 18 quarterback hurries. What does he look like in 2025 going into year three? That's what should excite the Missouri fans the most. And as a pure pass rusher, this kid is a Ferrari coming off the edge. I mean, that first step, that ability to attack the outside shoulder of offensive tackles, quite frankly, there ain't that many tackles that can deal with the twitch and the juice Damon Wilson has. No, I think he had to take some steps in the right direction as a run defender, and that's probably why he didn't play as much for Georgia, especially as a freshman. He's put on the weight. I mean, he went from 230 coming out of high school all the way up to 250 pounds. He certainly looks the part. We've talked about this a lot for Missouri. You know, that one way they can take that next step, if you will, in the SEC, start looking like the top teams in the SEC along the lines of scrimmage. Damon Wilson is a guy that you want on your roster. Want to get a little bit more into Damon Wilson, want to get a little bit more in terms of what Missouri's done in the portal and specifically what this edge rusher room is going to look like, because you start kind of looking under the hood going into 2025. This pass rush unit for Missouri has the potential to be elite for the Tigers in 2025. Fired up to get into it. Before we do it, as always, to the Missouri fans, been a blast talking this program. Been a blast covering some of these transfer portal commitments. The amount of support y'all continue to show means the world. If you guys do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Dill, this to me is becoming one of those teams where we got to start building that 2025 depth chart out because they're starting to check a lot of boxes. I will give you the T-Box, a guy that you've watched a lot of over the last couple of years. What's he bringing to the table to this Missouri defense here?
I mean, you kind of said it, like absolutely premier top-end pass rush traits.
Yes.
And you did start to see him fill his game out. And you said it, like in his freshman year especially, like you could kind of tell he didn't want to play the run, didn't really have the physicality to do it. But he built that up. I mean, he's up to the weight I think he needs to be at. Like the physical maturation's taken place. I don't know that his body needs to change a whole lot.
Yes.
Now it's just about continuing to develop as an elite player. And frankly, I almost feel like if I'm a Georgia fan, I would have wanted to see more of him because at times that pass rush didn't feel like it was always going for Georgia. He as a pure pass rusher I think could be one of the better pass rushers in college.
100%. You ask Georgia fans, and look, Georgia is one of those programs that recruits really well out of the high school ranks. They lose guys to the transfer portal. A lot of those guys are like, all right, just couldn't really crack it for the Georgia Bulldogs. Go play at another stop where you maybe have some more opportunity to get on the football field and develop. This ain't one of those guys. Like if you were to pull Georgia fans, and I'm sure there's going to be some Georgia fans in the comment section, this was a guy that you didn't want to lose. You wanted to see what year three was going to look like for him in a Georgia Bulldog uniform. And for Missouri, you kind of capitalized here. I think there's a reason this kid's a top 5 kid in the transfer portal, because not only is he's one of those guys that you're getting a solid football player, you might be getting a great football player in 2025.
That's a good point. You kind of make that trajectories on the right path, if you will. And like a little bit different than like obviously landing who's that defensive tackle? Chris McCollum. That's what like that type of guy who you felt like you needed to do a lot with to get him ready. And frankly, credit to Mizzou.
Pretty good.
They got him playing really good football now. At Florida, he wasn't exactly making those progressions, if you will, in the right way.
Yeah.
Damon Wilson, like if you just keep him on track of where he's going, you get a really good football player. And again, we've talked about this with Mizzou. When they hit guys in the portal, I feel like they have done a really good job of developing them and getting them, like Torino Pride, I even look at, they got him playing at a pretty high level, like that type of guy. that's kind of the blueprint. Mizzou's done a really good job with it. If they do a good job with Damon Wilson, they get a special player.
Yeah, that is one thing to know. And I was going to talk a little bit about what Coach Drink is doing with this program. They are one of those teams that at least strikes me as almost that perfect balance between, hey, we're going to recruit top 20 classes out of high school. I believe they came number 17 in the 2025 class. They had, 4 kids in the top 100 nationally. And then we're going to do top 10 in the transfer portal. Like, to me, that's the balance. Now, there are some programs, you look at Clemson, that do a good job recruiting the high school ranks, but probably need to start adding some additions in the transfer portal. And then there are some programs like Ole Miss where it's like, all right, you're doing some really good work in the transfer portal, probably need to do a little bit better job on the high school trail. Coach Drink's a really smart guy. And I think he's building this roster, and he's kind of found that perfect blend where even Missouri in 2024, it was what I would say a disappointing season for the Tigers. What you can feel good about, though, is that you had a roster that was capable of competing at the top end of the SEC. Now, some injuries didn't really go Missouri's way, but at least you're putting yourself in the spot where you can compete at that level. And you start
Frankly,
looking.
when we think like 9-3 as a disappointing year for a Missouri team, like that's just kind of, I think,
Where you
telling
want it.
you where he's gotten
Yeah.
this program. Like we were talking like very much a dark horse. And again, I think everyone would have liked to see what they could have done full health. Like you lose a guy like Darius Smith, and we talk about what that pass rush could have been. Like those two together, him and Damon Wilson, 2 former Georgia Bulldogs, that's going to be a fun unit because I look at what Darius Smith looked like in that spring game. Super explosive, super twitchy, long, athletic pass rusher. Damon Wilson kind of has some of those similar traits, although a little bit more proven, let's say, on the field.
Yep.
Those two, to me, I'm looking, that could be a really fun edge rusher.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Like, what does this edge rusher room look like? Now, you have to replace Johnny Walker, who is awesome for Missouri. Because Missouri, again, you said it best. A disappointing season in 2024, given the standards. I was one that was banging the table for Missouri to make the playoffs in August. Johnny Walker was awesome. And you have to replace some of that pass rush production. Look, at the end of the day, if you want to have an elite defense, you got to affect the quarterback, and you got to affect the quarterback with your front four. You can't be relying on second-level blitzes to get after the quarterback. If you can win with your front four, chances are you're going to be a good defense. This edge rusher room, right? You're bringing Damon Wilson, and I don't think this kind of shows how high I am on Damon Wilson. I think he'd be one of the best pass rushers in the country next year. You have Zion Young, who you know is really solid, especially against the run. You're bringing in Nate Johnson from App State, who's another kind of pass rush specialist, if you will. And then you have Darius Smith coming back. And like you said, if we get anything, sort of what Darius Smith was in the spring game, like he's going to be a dude for the Missouri Tigers. That's 4 guys that you feel really good about getting after the passer for Missouri in 2025. That's the blueprint. And I think that's what Missouri fans should be so excited about going into the 2025 year.
And again, I even think like a well-rounded room too, because you look like a guy like Eddie Kelly, I feel like it's kind of underrated. Like not the pass rusher that some of these other guys were talking about, but a good player against the run. Zion Young, same thing, good physical edge defender who, again, gives you a little bit more pass rush upside, I feel like, than maybe at Eddie Kelly, but a guy who's going to be physical against the run, hopefully get you in positions to get after it, be in third and long, second and long, those pass rush downs, so you can really turn the stars of your team if you lose.
Somebody said that in the comment section on a previous Missouri episode, and I couldn't agree more. You look at the defensive line, specifically this edge rusher room, you got a lot of guys that are different kind of body types that provide different skill sets. You said it best. Like there's something you said was important. If you want to sack the quarterback, if you want to affect the quarterback, you damn well better be stopping the run and getting into those second and third and longs where you can bring on a guy like Damon Wilson and let him pin his ears back and just get after the passer. Now, that's not me pigeonholing Damon Wilson into only a pass rush specialist, because I do think he's taken those steps to be better against the run. But even if it looks like, all right, Zion Young may be on the football field first, second down, stop the run, third and long, Damon Wilson, fresh body trotting out there, these offensive tackles are going to have tough Saturdays when you play a team like Missouri. We'll do a full recap on what Missouri's done in the portal, but you got to be fired up about some of the additions they've made combined with the young pipeline they're creating. through the high school recruiting
And it's a
trail.
little bit of a quieter class, it feels like, top to bottom than maybe it was last year, but that's not necessarily a bad thing because I think Coach Drink probably wants to get it closer where, yeah, he wants to be able to supplement and add top tier guys like a Damon Wilson and some of the other additions they've been able to make. But I do think it's showing they're probably a little bit more comfortable with their talent pipeline, if you will, as they've been able to ramp their recruiting rankings up. Because when he first got there, the cupboards were a little bit barren. He had to rebuild that program back up to being more of a recruiting power, frankly. And I think they're starting to get there. I think this is the type of class you're more looking for, a little bit smaller, a handful of top end real game or difference makers, if you will.
Yeah.
I think that's a better recipe than kind of the Ole Miss model. So I really, again, like where Drinkwitz is taking this team. I like the fact that 9-3 is a really disappointing year in a sense.
Yeah.
I'd be really fired up if I'm a Mizzou fan about some of those developments.
All right. We'll pause it there. Very much worth stopping watching my NCIS to cover a little Damon Wilson. Gladly. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later.